So good morning, welcome back many of you from our training session yesterday. So my name is Jos Solarts. I am the head of veterinary risk and surveillance at EMA's Veterinary Medicines Division. This webinar is the second training event on the new Eurovigilance 3 system, and it will focus on some practical aspects related to the implementation of the module on signal management of the guideline on veterinary good pharmacovigilance practices. So yesterday we specifically focused and took the guideline as the basis, and we had very good questions. So also today I'm inviting you all to continue during the presentations to put your questions in the chat, and we will have at the end of the presentation, the end of the day, we will have a long session to address and to discuss together your questions. So today my colleague Laura Descalzo, who is our Business Technical Lead, will demo the system, showing the queries available for the companies and how to perform signal management and take advantage of the full data set that we have in Eurovigilance. At the end of the session, again, we have time left for questions. Should you have any additional questions following the webinar, please email using this vetchange.program email. We will type the email address in the chat as well. Part of the housekeeping, I have to remind you that today's webinar is being recorded for training purposes, and it will be made available on the corporate website of the EMA in the coming weeks. By continuing to be in this session, you are consenting to be recorded. Your personal data will be processed by the EMA in accordance with Regulation 2018-1725. Should you not agree, then we kindly ask you to leave the meeting. So after this short introduction and without further ado, please, Laura, the floor is yours. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Jos. So following from Daniel's excellent presentation yesterday, where he covered the legislation aspects and the signal management process, today, firstly, I'm going to present you with an example of a simple methodology for signal detection. Then I will provide an overview of the data analysis systems and the dashboard developed for signal detection and evaluation in eurovigilance. And I will also show you some examples on how those dashboards can help you with conducting signal detection and signal evaluation, as well as obtaining an overview of the data for the products that your organization is responsible for, and also some tools designed for aiding the continuous monitoring of the data. Also, I will explain what I'm not going to cover today is how to log in the system and the in-depth functionality. We are going to provide you with a really comprehensive training manual that will cover all those aspects, and will also explain how to obtain the rights to log in into the system. So Katarina, please, if we can go to the first slide. So in this slide, I'm going to provide you with an example of a methodology for simple one for product-based analysis or substance-based analysis. So firstly, before even starting for an assessor to even start evaluating the data, it goes without saying that they should have a really in-depth knowledge of the product. So the composition, the mode of action, and the adverse events that are currently stated in the product information. So then to start analyzing the data, the first aspect. Thank you, Katarina. So the first part of the process will be to define a baseline, get a really good comprehensive overview of the data that you are going to analyze, such as the number of reports involved, the data distribution, for example, the species, geographical origin, etc. The next step of the process then will be the prioritization, because for some products you may find a potentially large amount of signals that may require further analysis or assessment. So you will need to prioritize which ones should be investigated first. So for aiding prioritization, one of the methods will be to focus on the terms that are not currently already included in the product information, taking into account the frequency of the reporting of those adverse events and the nature and the severity of the VEDRA terms. So those issues may involve human reports, high numbers of animal deaths, or reports containing medically important events. And once you have decided the signal or signals that are going to be evaluated in depth, what you do next really, really depends on the amount of data that you have. Because if there are only 5 reports, probably the most logical course of action would be to go to the line listing and to the case reports and study those reports in depth, and then try to reach a conclusion from there. However, if you have a really large amount of data to analyze, that may require a more in-depth evaluation using the tools provided in the data warehouse, for example, that will allow you to break down that data into different parameters. And that is where we go on the next step. So to evaluate the signal and consider the possible association of the product or substance that you are assessing at report level for each of the signals that you are investigating, some issues to be considered will be the geographical origin of the reports, breeds. Is there a breed issue? So are there any age aspects? Are the events mainly happening in young animals, geriatric animals? And also other aspects to be considered could be any other reactions reported together with this reaction, because it may be like a syndrome, for example. Further aspects to be considered: time to onset, dosing aspects in case that there may be off-label use, and the route of administration of the product. And then it goes without saying that the case narratives should also always be read and considered for each individual report included in the signal. Then we move on when trying to determine whether there is a causal association between the product and the reaction. Other aspects need to also be taken into account, such as confounding factors. Many signals may be due to other aspects rather than the product involved, such as the disease and any other medication administered to the animal. So I will start with the first aspect, the confounded by disease. So in this instance, it needs to be considered whether the adverse event that has occurred may actually be a symptom of the disease that the product is supposed to be treating, rather than an adverse reaction to the product itself. But also another aspect that needs to be taken into account, whether there is an aggravation of the disease. And in all instances, when data analysis is being carried out, clinical judgment should always be used when making the considerations and coming to a conclusion. The other confounding factor that may appear is concomitant medication. So it needs to be considered whether the reaction was due to the product that is being assessed or to any other product that may have administered to the animal at the same time. A further aspect as well that should also be pointed out is the population frequency of some events. So certain events happen randomly in the general population, whether a medicinal product is administered or not. And at least in veterinary medicine, the baseline frequencies for those events are not usually known. And those events, they may actually appear in your data set and have been reported as adverse events, even though they may not have been caused by the veterinary medicinal product. With regards to this methodology, this is just a very simple methodology. There are many others. We just wanted to present you with a way of that it may be a start for assessing a product or an active substance. So if we go to the next slide, please. What I'm going to do now is go through the components that have been developed in ultravigilance veterinary for collecting and assessing adverse event report data. And the main component will be the Union Pharmacovigilance Database. And the Union Pharmacovigilance Database is not a single system. It's composed of various modules. One of them is the reporting system that is used to collect the information on adverse event reports. And another module, which is the one we are going to be focusing today, is the data warehouse. That is the tool that will be used to analyze the adverse event report data collected via the system that I have mentioned before. In order to be able to group the information for further assessment, the ultravigilance system uses the product data from the Union product database. And this information is used in both the reporting tool and in the data warehouse for facilitating reporting in one hand and for facilitating data analysis on the other hand. An additional module that we will cover in a further training in January will be the module that has been developed or is being developed at the moment to report the signals from the side of marketing authorization holders and also from competent authorities. But we will not focus on that system today. This will be done in the training in January. So if we go to the next slide, please, Katrina. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to describe some dashboards that have been developed in the data warehouse. And I will start focusing on the ones that have been designed for product or substance-based analysis. Some of the functionality on the dashboards that I'm going to present is covered in various dashboards, but they are tailored mainly to do a specific function. And I will start with the adverse event overview. So when we were talking about the methodology, the first step was to obtain baseline data. And this dashboard has been developed mainly with the intent of helping the assessors do that. So I will present it later during the live demo, but this dashboard mainly contains the number of adverse events for product and species, number of animals affected, number of fatalities, and then it provides you with various graphs and tables that allows you to get all the information for the product based on the time frame that you will enter when you run the query. Then we will move on to the signal detection dashboard. This one has been developed to help assess the data for a product or group of products or substances and to allow to compare the frequency of the number of adverse events reports for a specific federal term, and then you can compare it to the reports involving other products and other clinical signs. And for that, we use a statistical measure called the ROR. This measure is also described in the manual that we are going to provide you with. Then, if there is a large data set for the signal that requires evaluation and the data you want to look at different aspects of the data, the best dashboard to use will be the signal evaluation dashboard. And this dashboard will allow you to analyze the profile of the affected animals, such as species, breed, and age, for adverse events of interest or for the potential signal, and will allow you to look at the different potential risk factors that we were talking about before, such as co-medication, geographical distribution, or the different pharmaceutical forms, if the product has various forms. So are the events happening more, let's say, on the tablet form than in the sputum form, for example, and that type of analysis. The next dashboard, we are not going to cover that one in depth. We'll probably focus on that one on the next training, but I will just explain what it does. So the data stratification dashboard allows you to compare a product to product of the same class, and also identifies it to try to identify and exclude outliers from the comparison. So on all the other dashboards, when the statistical measure is calculated, the ROR, it uses the data of all the other products in the database. And the data stratification dashboard will allow the assessor to restrict the comparison to a set of data of choice based on various parameters. For example, if the product belongs to the same class, the ATC code is used. And we can move on to the next slide, please. So before showing you how a dashboard is constructed and how the different filters and prompts are normally set out, we need to explain how the data from the UPD is been configured in ultravigilance to allow grouping of these data mainly into two types of data to allow different types of analysis. So the products in the database, let's say I'm going to use an example of a real product because it is the best way of explaining. For a medicinal product, you may have various strengths and various pharmaceutical forms. And it is mainly the product name usually is composed of a brand name, a strength form, and a pharmaceutical form. Not all medicinal products contain all those parts, but our system then allows us to break down those entries into 4 different types. The first one is solely based on the product brand name. Then the second combination is the product name plus the strength. The third combination is the product name plus the pharmaceutical form. And the fourth combination is very similar to the actual medicinal product name, which is the product name plus the strength plus the pharmaceutical form, but it will not contain any information about the species in veterinary medicinal products. Then there is another breakdown that is also generated from the product information. But in this case, the information that is taken is the active ingredient or ingredients of the product. So the first entry that is done is the active ingredient or ingredients name for the product. The second one will be the active ingredient or ingredients plus the strength. The third one is the active ingredients plus the pharmaceutical form. And the fourth one is the active ingredients plus the pharmaceutical form plus the strength. What these combinations will help us with is to group and combine data for analysis. So it gives you great flexibility on how you wish to analyze the data that has been reported to EVVet. And if we go to the next slide, I can show you this is one example of a dashboard, in particular the signal detection dashboard. And I'm going to explain now the filter selection page and the different components. So in this dashboard, the first thing you need to do is to select whether you want to assess data for a product, for an active substance, or a group of products. And the breakdown from the product information that we explained on the slide before will help you understand the different levels of the product information selection here. So I'm going to go through them one by one and relate them to the slide before. The first one that is shown there is the active substance. So if you use this filter selection, the system will return the data for products containing the active substance or substances that has been selected in the prompt. And I use the word contain because some products may be composed of more than one substance. But if you use the active substance level, the system will retrieve data for products that contain that active substance or that active substance in combination with other substances. So it will be a global retrieve of data. The next one, the product short name, that will use the information from the product brand name part of the breakdown that we showed you before on the previous slide. So will allow to group all the data for a product containing a certain brand name. And in all instances, you can select more than one and combine them in the results. Then the next one doesn't require much explanation. So this entry you will be selecting a specific ATC vet code at any level of the hierarchy, and the data that will be returned will be related to any products that belong to that particular ATC vet code that has been selected at runtime. The reported brand name level, this is going to require a bit of explanation also about the recoding process. So first, this level allows you to retrieve data as has been reported in the adverse event report. You should usually try to avoid searching on that level because that data has not been aggregated. When doing data analysis, the most efficient way of doing it is aggregating the data that you wish to analyze together and then run the report. And the other filter selections allow you to do that. However, to be able to aggregate the data under the different product short names or under the different product composition levels, that requires a process that we call recoding that runs in the background. So the recoding process, there is an automatic component and a manual component, and it links the product name or substance name that has been reported in the adverse event report with the relevant entry in the UPD, hence allowing a further grouping of the data. If the recoding process has not taken place, the system doesn't know that there is a link between the reported product and the product in the UPD. Hence, the data cannot be grouped. The reason that this reported brand name level is shown here and is in case you need to retrieve data very quickly if there is an emergency issue, or if you want to actually check whether all the reported terms have been aggregated under the correct brand name. That is the only reason that this reported brand name level should be used. In any other instances, the advice is to use the already grouped data. Then, if we move on to the next set of data, the next filter is also a simple one, is the product authorization number. So the system allows you to select a product authorization number, and this information is the one coming from the UPD. And then the reported authorization number works the same way as the reported brand name. So it allows you to select the authorization number that has been reported in the adverse event report prior to recoding. So the same caveats that we mentioned before with regards to the reported brand name apply. So it's not aggregated data, and it shouldn't be used unless there is a very compelling reason to do so. And then we will move on to the next set of data, which is the product composition. And we will talk about them as a group. So with regards to this level, there's these different levels. These take the information from the second set of decomposition of the product information that we spoke about before, which is the one using the active substance or substances. So the first one, the composition level, will use the first level that we spoke about earlier and will be the active substance or substances. So now we will talk about the difference between selecting this level or selecting the active substance level. When I described the active substance level before, I used the word contain. So the system will retrieve, if you use active substance level, the system will retrieve information for any product that contains that active substance. However, if you enter the same active substance on the product composition level, the system will only retrieve information for products that are composed solely of that active substance. So if you enter one active substance, only the products that are composed by that single active substance will be retrieved, and the combination products data will not be retrieved. If you want to select an entry for products that are composed for more than one active substance, you need to select that combination in this filter. So it allows you to group data on the basis of the composition of the product. And the next three prompts aggregate on that. So on the following one, on the strength, it aggregates the strength component of the product to the active substance one. So you can select for a substance or group of substances plus the strength. And it allows you to group the data based on those factors. The next one uses the formulation. So it's composition plus formulation, pharmaceutical form. And the final one will be the composition plus strength plus pharmaceutical form. So it allows you to assess data for products with the same composition, strength, and pharmaceutical form together, stripping out the brand name component. So it, regardless of the brand, it allows you to group all that data together. Then the next prompt relates to dates. So it's a mandatory prompt, as all the mandatory prompts or filters are marked with the word required, and it allows you to select a period of time for which you wish to run your analysis. And can we move on to the next slide, please? And then you can select whether the data that is going to be retrieved relates to reports related to animals or human or both. And then on the fourth one shown here, on the fourth prompt, there is a very comprehensive set of optional filters that can be applied to the report. These are generally the same in all the dashboards. And as I mentioned before, I'm not going to go through each of them one by one because they will be thoroughly described on the user manual, which is going to be published in the near future. And if we move to the next slide, please. So this is an example of the type of data that can be retrieved from the dashboard. So you can obtain like an idea of the geographical distribution of the data for a product or substance, and have a look at the number of cases, and the prompt allows you to also see the number of animals reacted. And the next slide, please. And it also allows you to see a breakdown of the data grouped by region and country, and show also the number of cases and number of animals reacted, broken down by animal or human reports. The numbers that appear in blue in the screen there represent links that take you to a further level on the report. So in this instance, this, for example, where you can see the number 25 next to France, you can click on the number and it will take you to the line listing showing you all the reports for that product that occurred in France. And from the line listing, you will be able to navigate to the individual case reports and look at the data for each specific report. And next slide, please. And finally, in the lower level of the majority of the dashboards, there will be a component that will show you a table with a breakdown of all the adverse events for the product of substance, usually grouped at preferred term, like usually presented, and the data is calculated at preferred term name. And in this instance, they are shown grouped by SOC level. But if the signal warrants it can be, there is a navigation that allowed you to go to the different levels of the VEDRA hierarchy. So from the preferred term level, you can go down to the low level term. And we will show you later how this navigation looks like in the system. Next slide, please. Some of the dashboards, for example, I am presenting here the signal evaluation dashboard, have a graphical component, and then from the graph, if a hand appears, it means that you can click on the graph and the system will take you to another level, which will break down the data in different ways depending on which graph you clicked on. So, for example, on the one that we are showing there, where it says top 10 number of cases by species, if you click on the species, the system will take you to a set of tables that will show you the data broken down by breed, by age, by weight, allowing you to do further analysis on the signal. Next slide, please. Which we are showing on this slide. So this is a view where you can do a really in-depth analysis of the data, and there is further functionality within the table, so you can access the case reports for following the link on the column named number of cases. One thing that I haven't mentioned before, and I think is worth mentioning now, in the majority of the dashboards, what we are counting is the concept that we called cases. So the report that is taken into account to produce the counts is always the latest valid version of our report. So if there's been an initial report and 5 follow-ups, only one version is counted and is usually the latest version that has been received for the count. Next slide, please. So this is another slide presenting you with the kind of information that you can obtain on the dashboard. So in this instance, it's showing you geographical information. The cases shown broken down by information type. So it is a safety issue or both safety and lack of expected efficacy, and you can navigate to the cases as well. For example, if you are trying to specifically focus on lack of efficacy, you can select the relevant part of the graph and navigate to the reports. Next slide, please. And finally, this is, for example, a breakdown of the data for a product into different pharmaceutical forms. So it breaks down the cases based on the pharmaceutical form and the country of occurrence. All these columns that are shown there can be removed from the display to aggregate the data further. So, for example, in this instance, if you were interested in aggregating the data at pharmaceutical product form level, you could remove the occurrence country and occurrence region column, and the system will automatically aggregate the data at the pharmaceutical product form level. and you will be able to access to the line listing of that aggregated data. And at the bottom, you can see a series of links that will allow you to do various things with the data that has been retrieved. So you will be able to print the information, you will be able to export the information to Excel, for example, or PDF. If we go to the next slide, please. So now we come to the live demo. A couple of caveats before I share my screen and show you. I'm going to show you 3 of the dashboards that have been developed. The development is not yet fully finalized, so we are going to be using the test system to do the demo with all the conditions that may happen. So please bear with me, have a bit of patience if things don't work the first time. Another handicap that we have at the moment, that even though it is a test system, it contains real data. So there is a limit to the functionality that I'm able to show you today, because I need to use real products or substances to show the data, and I don't want to have any confidentiality issues. So we are going to be showing some data, but it's not comprehensive. It does not contain all the data for the product or products that we are selected, and not all the data has been recoded. So the method that I'm going to use for searching is the reported brand name level, which I mentioned before should not be used once the system is in production. But for the purposes of the training, I will use that method and aggregate the data after. So this is the tool that has been developed for signal detection and signal evaluation, and like I mentioned before, also has some dashboards that will allow you to obtain an overview of the data for products or substances. And the first dashboard that I'm going to demo is that one, the one that will allow the assessor to obtain an overview of a product or substance of the full data set, or based on a certain period of time, to get a baseline for the information that is going to further be assessed, using probably some of the other dashboards that will be presented later. To access the dashboards, there is a link that is named Open. And the system presents you, as I mentioned before, with a set of questions that you need to answer in order to obtain the data. The first, so some of them, as I mentioned before, are marked as required and need to be complete. The others are optional, so depending on the type of analysis or the instance of the analysis that you are carrying out, you will use some and not others. So I'm going to start by selecting the information, and I'm going to use ivermectin. And I know that is not a product name, but that is done on purpose, so not to use any specific brand names. So I will select a very wide date period, because as I mentioned, is a test system, and the amount of information contained in the system is limited that can be accessed. I will not select at first a specific VEDRA term, because the purpose of searching at in this instance is to obtain an overview of the data for that specific product. So I wish to see all the data related to both human and animal reports, and I will not select any optional filters. While the system runs, the message received date is based on the date the system received the information. So on this dashboard, the system first presents you with an overview of the data for the product or substance that was selected prior to running the query on the field set. So there's the number of cases that have been received. So then the animals affected. As I mentioned before, this is counting cases, not reports. So if there is one initial report and 5 follow-ups, it will be counting it as one case. Then the number of animals affected involved in these cases, the number of fatal cases, and the number of animals that have died. Then the next set of data is related to geographical information. So you've got the number of cases by region for the specific period that was selected at runtime, and the number of cases by region for all cases. In this instance, because we selected at runtime a very large period of time, the system is presenting the same information on the number of cases for the specified period, and in the graph showing all cases. If in the filters you select, for example, last year, the difference will be that in this graph, the system will be showing the data for the specified period, and in this graph, it will be presenting the data for all cases. And when I hover over the report, I clicked it, and it goes down to showing the data for each specific country. We are not going to start navigating to all the potential lower level reports, because we only have a couple of hours for the whole webinar, and it will take a long time. All this information will be, as I mentioned before, on the manual. So you can read for each specific dashboard all the functionality that is contained in every graph and in every table presented. But as I said before, when you point at a figure, if the arrow changes into a hand, it means that there is another level of the report that you can access from the graph or table. So the next set of information relates to the number of cases and fatal cases. So you've got an overview of the span of the last 10 years, and it shows the number of cases received each year and which of those were fatal cases. And on the graph on the right-hand side, it shows the number of fatal cases over the average. Then to the next set of information. So there is a table that shows the number of cases per species and grouped by VEDRA SOC name. From this link that I'm pointing out now, you can navigate down the different levels of the VEDRA hierarchy to show the number of cases at the different levels, let's say at HLT, at preferred term, or even at lower level. And from the graph, you can navigate to a line listing showing the number of cases that, for example, in these instances, that have been received for cats showing behavioral disorders. And there is a scroll bar here that allows you to scroll through the information. And the same with this graph, it presents this one, instead of being based on the number of cases, is based on the number of animals affected. So it shows the data for the last 10 years, the number of reports, or the number of animals affected per year, and the number of animals that died. Then at the bottom, so this gives you an overview. The set of graphs at the top gives you a good overview of the data. And then there is further functionality at the bottom of the report. If you click on See Details, the system will take you to a table that I will show in a few minutes, so I won't describe it on detail now. And then you are also able to navigate to other dashboards. Like if you click on the link to the signal detection report, the system will take you to one of the reports included in the signal detection dashboard, and will take all the parameters that you have input when you run the query. I'm not going to show you how to do that because I'm going to show you different functionality when I demo the signal detection dashboard. So, but the link is here to allow you to navigate seamlessly from one dashboard to another. In here, as I mentioned before, in all the other dashboards, the statistical measure that we use for highlighting potential signals of disproportionality, which is the ROR, is calculated based on the number of cases. But there is also a functionality that allows the calculation of the ROR based on the number of animals reacted. And that functionality can be reached by clicking on this link included here. At present, for the data that has been collected in EVVET2, this data is populated, the number of animals reacted is populated from the report level information. So there is a field that is number of animals treated and another field that is called number of animals affected. So in the current system, the information that is used to calculate the ROR for the number of animals reacted is taken from that field. However, for the VICH guideline allows you to report the number of animals that reacted for each individual VEDRA term. So what the system is going to do now is to calculate the number of animals reacted, the ROR calculation based on the number of animals reacted. It will first look on whether the VEDRA term includes the specific number of animals that reacted, and will take the information from there. As it is not mandatory information, if the information is not included at the VEDRA term level, then it will take the information from the field that we mentioned before from the number of animals reacted field at report level. So the information will always be possible to calculate the ROR based on the number of animals reacted, but the measures may be calculated from different fields depending on the information available. And then there is a further link here that allows the user to navigate to a report that presents you with information for concomitant products. So you can see what concomitant products have been reported with the product that has been selected in the filtering criteria, in the same reports as the product that has been selected. The next thing I'm going to do is click on the See Details link to show you.
Laura, you're doing very well and the questions are coming in very good. We've just passed 11, our normal break time of the agenda, but please continue for a moment. The system is behaving well. Just break whenever you feel fit within the next 10 minutes sometime.
Okay, so we will see how long it takes to retrieve this information. If it takes some time, what we can do is break now. If it retrieves the information within the next minute, then I will go on, because I may need to come out of the system and go in again.
Okay.
If it takes a long
Let's
time.
see what's happening.
Okay, we will give it 20 seconds and then we decide. This is what I mentioned before. I am using a test system. So we will go for a break, I believe, and then I will log in again and have the link ready.
So welcome back to all from the break. It was a good timing. We were struggling a little bit within the break, recovering the system, but we've managed now on one of the queries. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you, Josh. So as you saw before the break, we were experiencing some technical problems trying to retrieve the results of the adverse event dashboard. The table I was going to show you provides a very good overview of the data for the product selected, broken down by VEDRA term. But it is going to take a long time to run because we seem to be experiencing performance issues. So we're going to change track a bit. I'm going to now focus on showing you the signal detection dashboard. This is a dashboard that has been mostly recreated from the previous system. So you should be able to see it now. Yes. And this dashboard has been mostly built up recreating the functionality that we had in the previous EVVET2 system, and the NCA assessors were using for the past 3 or 4 years to conduct the signal detection for centrally authorized products. As I mentioned the previous performance issues, I'm going to try to touch the system as little as possible and talk you through the dashboard. So on the first page, where it mentions the filters, it is very similar to the filters contained in the dashboard that I demoed earlier. So on the first part, you will select either a product or a substance. Then the next step is to select a period of time for your analysis. And then whether you wish to see human animal reports or both together. So that is what I've done to run this query. At the top, or in this case, at the bottom, you can access the filtering criteria that has been used to run the query. So you also have you can always refer to the filters that you have used when assessing the data. And now I'm going to present you the different aspects of the table that you can see on your screens. The period filter that I used when I ran the query is a 1-year period. In this case, we are focusing on, let's say, a 1-year signal detection period for a product that has been a long time in the market. And we are going to view the data that has been received during that period of time and have a look at the adverse events that have occurred for that product within that period. So I'm going to start from the top. On the product hierarchy level, you can select the level of output that you want to see the data at. So the system automatically returns the data at the medicinal product short name level. So if you remember when we talked about the different levels earlier, is the level that groups all the different presentations for a specific brand. So the data is always returned at that level. If you had queried the system for an active substance, then the data that you will see here will be broken down by any product names for products that contain the substance that you queried at. Then you can also look at the data by composition level, by active substance, or by ATC vet code. This allows you to be very flexible on your analysis. On the next set of information here shows you the period of time that was selected when running the query. So in this instance, it's a 1-year period of time. Next set of information. The results are always calculated and presented per species, and you can view the data for all the different species by clicking on the down-looking arrow here and selecting the species for which you wish to analyze the data for. Then we are going to move on to the main set of information. And I will describe what each of the columns is showing or calculating. So on the first column, you will have the name or names of the medicinal products or substances that were selected, either when the query was run or by looking at the different levels of the dictionary. So if you selected a product name, this is what will be displayed here. If on the filtering selector at the top, you select an active substance, this column will display the active substance. Then we move to the next set of data. So in this column, number of cases between date 1 and date 2, you will see the number of cases that have been received for the product or substance selected between the dates that were selected when running the query. And this information, the number of cases, is broken down by preferred term name. So, for example, let's see this aggression. So for the product selected, there was one case with aggression during the period of time selected at runtime. If you see on the VEDRA preferred time column, there are some terms which are highlighted. This is representing the medically important events. As I mentioned before, this is test data, so the terms that are actually being highlighted in the test database may not include all the medically important events, or may not even be medically important events. But when this report will go in production, this will be representing the medically important events. So they will be highlighted in the display to help you focus on your prioritization step. So together with the number of cases, you also will have information related to the number of animals reacted. So, because in this instance, we are looking at information for dogs, most of the time the numbers will be similar. However, if we were looking at production animals, the numbers may differ greatly. So you may have a large number of animals reacted in 2 or 3 cases. We will then look at the next set of information. So on the middle column here, we've got the ROR, and the 2 columns next to it are the lower confidence interval and the up confidence interval for the statistical measure. This ROR that is calculated here is the cumulative ROR. So it's for the total data set for the product. And I will explain the logic when we move on. The next set of information I'm going to explain is this one. So we've got in here the ROR until date 1. So this ROR takes into account the information that was received prior to the dates that you selected at runtime. So what this allows you to do is to have a look at the impact that the new information that has been received has on the ROR for the reaction of interest. And then the last column here shows the total number of cases for the product for the VEDRA term. Then you can see that some of the numbers on the ROR columns are highlighted. So this is to help focus your attention on some terms based on the ROR number. So we've included some conditions on the calculation of the ROR, and it is not calculated if the total number of cases is, I'll put it the other way around. The ROR is calculated when there are 3 or more cases for the relevant VEDRA term. And then if the ROR is higher than 2, it is highlighted. And if the lowest confidence interval for the ROR is higher than 1, it is also highlighted to help focus the attention. As Daniel mentioned yesterday, you should not only take into account the statistical measures when trying to select or prioritize a specific VEDRA term for further analysis. It is just it's a tool to help you in your prioritization step, but not the only tool that should be used. And I will not focus on that aspect because Daniel covered it very thoroughly yesterday during his presentation. Then I think I didn't mention these two columns here because I was focusing more on explaining why the ROR that is shown next to the recent data is the cumulative ROR. So these two columns that are remaining to be explained relate to the number of cases that were received for the product or products prior to the dates that were selected at runtime. Then with regards to functionality, when the system first returns the data, it shows only 25 rows, and you need to click in this arrow here that is a double-headed arrow to display the full information for the product. Then what we are going to do, we are going to show you, we are going to take one of the terms that have been highlighted as medically important events, one that has got some reports. And we are going to use this as an example of how you would evaluate a potential signal using the signal evaluation dashboard. Oh, before we do that, actually, I wanted to mention that from this column, you can access the line listings for the cases representing this federal term. So from here, if you click, the system will take you to a line listing containing all the reports for the product showing cardiac disorders. And then from the line listing, you will be able to access the case reports. So then now we will move on to the signal evaluation dashboard to show you what different parameters may be used to further evaluate the data underlying a potential signal. System permitting, of course. Let's see what happens. So this is the dashboard, the signal evaluation dashboard. And the process is the same. We click on open, and then we enter the parameters. So please bear with me while I select the information. And because this is the first time that we see the information on the system, what I'm going to do is do a cumulative review of the data. So we are not only going to look at the data for the current period, but we are going to evaluate all the data for that specific term that we wish to look further into. So we select a large period of time to allow us to include all the information for the product. And to select the term of interest, you can select the term at any level of the VEDRA hierarchy. In this case, we are going to select the preferred term that we were focusing on. And I believe it was cardiac disorders, NOS. And as we are here, before I run the query, I will explain this all cases or new cases prompt This allows you to focus your attention in totally new cases if required. One example I can give is, let's say you've got a potential incident happening and data is coming in rapidly, and you want to distinguish between genuinely new cases that are arriving or follow-ups to previous cases. If you select all cases, you get all the data for the product, including initial reports and follow-ups up to the received between the date range that you specify at runtime. If you select new cases, what the system will return is any genuinely new cases that were received between these dates. So it will exclude any follow-ups to reports that had been received initially prior to date 1. So it allows the focus in genuinely new data. And now we will proceed to showing you the different aspects that you can evaluate for the data for the product that has been selected. So there are various tabs here. I'm not going to show you the last one because it just included a link to the system that was used before for collecting the information on signal management. Eventually, we will include there a link to the current signal management system, but it is being developed at the moment, so I cannot show you that part. So let's hope that this works. Great. Okay, so remember that we selected a product, cumulative, like a very large time frame. So we get the cumulative data and a specific VEDRA term. So what the system is showing us here on the first tab is the number of cases that have been received for that VEDRA term for that product, the number of animals affected, and how many animals died. On the next set of data, you can focus on time to onset. So first you get a graph, and from the graph, you can access a table and view the cases for each of the different times to onset displayed in the graph. The next graph shows you the number of animals affected and died within the last 10 years. And the same as before, you can access the information and the line listing. Then let's move on to the next set of information. So in here, you can see the number of cases by species. So if there are various species involved, you can see the data broken down by the species. If you click on the information here, you may remember that on the slides I presented earlier, there was a slide showing the data for a product or for a species broken down by age, weight, and breed. You can access that table by clicking on the bar here for each species. And on the right-hand side, you can see whether the product they use according to label. So it shows the ones that were used according to label, the ones that weren't, and the ones for which we have no information because it's not a mandatory field. Then we move on to the Products Information tab. So while it runs, In here, for example, you can see geographical information. And in this one, you can click on the different prompts and change the parameters. So it shows you can change regions. And if there were more than one medicinal product that you were assessing, you can click here and view the data for the different products. In here, you can change between the information being displayed by number of animals affected or by number of cases. And at the bottom of the graph, you can see a link that will take you to a table that shows the number of animals affected broken down by pharmaceutical form or active substance. In here, you can see the different the data broken down by information type. So whether they were safety issues, lack of expected effectiveness, or any other of the categories from the information type field. And lastly, you can see that data broken down by year, and you can flick between the different information types. Product association. I will start talking before the system shows the results. This tab allows you to focus on data for concomitant products. So if you suspect potential interactions, this will allow you to see what other products were mentioned in the same report as the product that you are assessing. So you can check and focus on those reports for potential interactions. And it will be nice to see it, but while we wait for the system to return the data, because I'm conscious of time, I will explain to you what the next tab does. So then in the next tab, you will be able to see what other weather terms were reported on the same report as those mentioning cardiac disorders. So it allows you to see whether there is any potential syndromes, for example. Josh, how are we doing for time? Should I wait for the results, or do you think we have enough information for now and we can move on to the presentation?
Yeah, I would continue. I mean, we're reaching 12 o'clock.
Okay.
Are it's doing something? No, it's your
Yes,
return.
well, it is just returning the information. So I will talk quickly through here. So there is a graph here that will show you on a color grid which are the concomitant products for which there is a highest number of reports, and you can flick through them. And you can then access via these two links the cases where no other products were reported, only the products that you are focusing on, and the cases where other products were reported. So it helps with the evaluation of the data. And now, Katerina, I will stop sharing the system and we can return to the presentation for the final part. You've stopped me, sir. Thank you. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So I can see that the screen is not showing the dashboard it's very small, the screenshot. We will try to fix that for when we distribute the presentation, but I'm going to present a dashboard to you now is more of a proof of concept than anything else for the moment, because as you know, we are developing the system together with as the guidelines have been developed. But this dashboard is called the signaling for reactions dashboard. And the concept of it will be to allow continuous monitoring for, let's say, the products belonging to a company, or for assessors to do the signal detection as well. So there are various prompts in here that you can use. On the first one, what the user should do is choose an output level. And this is for grouping the information. So you can select either the medicinal product short name, active substance, or ATC vet code. And once we know that there are a lot of discussions on how to best group products. So once it is decided which other ways can be used, what other manners can be used to group products, this information will be included here as well. Obviously, we need to prioritize when it will be included, but it will be one of the things that can be done in the future. So, as I said, output level. Then the next prompt is related to the dates. And the aim here is to choose a very short period of time, because we are talking about monitoring the data that is coming in to EVVet, and trying to see early whether there is any data that warrants immediate evaluation. So if your organization has a large portfolio of products with products that have a high number of reports, obviously the monitoring should be shorter than if you only have one product and has very few reports. So you could choose here, let's say 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, depending, as I mentioned, on the data for your products. Then the animal and human filter that we've mentioned several times. And on the next prompt, there are 2 different filters that you can use depending which organization you represent. So if you are a marketing authorization holder, you can select your organization there. And if you are a headquarter, you can select your organization plus any affiliates. And if you are competent authority, national competent authority, you can select a country to focus on, let's say, for example, your national products. And we move on to the next slide, please, Catherine. The first display, I'm not sure how useful it is. It was just to provide a graphical representation of the data that has been received for the products of the organization during the period of time that was selected at runtime. And it's broken down per species and per VEDRA term. Perhaps it will be good. At the moment, it's showing all the VEDRA terms, but because it's a signaling report, I'm not sure yet whether it will be best to just focus on the medically important events or maintain all the VEDRA terms there. That is to be determined. One thing that we are going to change in here is the line graph, because the way it is represented, it seems that the different products that are mentioned here on the bars are related, which is not the case. This is just showing the ROR for each product and the VEDRA term, but it should not be shown on a continuous line. It will be displayed as a dot. And then if we go to the next slide, so this is the output that you will receive when running this query. As I said, very short period of time. And what the system will show you here is for each species and for all the products belonging to the organization that was selected when the query was run, all the cases that were received showing broken down by VEDRA term. And the display is very, very similar to the signal detection report. So you can see the impact that those new cases have on the ROR for each product. So what is the difference between this report and the other dashboard? So in here, as you notice, we did not select a specific product. We just selected that we wanted to see the data at product level, so that the data returned is for any product that meets the condition, and the only condition that we've put is the time and the organization. Next slide, please. And I'm going to very briefly show the next slide. So another report that will allow you to obtain an overview of the data for all your products is the list of product report. So in here you've got various parameters that you can use, and I'm not sure whether I mentioned it earlier for the other dashboards, but you can combine the dashboard. So you are not restricted to selected one value. You can combine the values to obtain the results that tailor to the type of analysis or data that you want to obtain at the end. So in here, for example, if you are a marketing authorization holder, you can enter the name of your organization. And if you then press enter, you will view the data for all the products belonging to your organization. You can apply further filters, such as I wish to view the data for all my products that are authorized in a country X, or via all the centrally authorized products, or all the data for my product that contain this active substance. And if we go to the next slide, Katerina, please, then this is the type of information that you will get. So the top part will show you the total number of cases related to the conditions that you entered when you run the report. So if you said, give me the data for all my products, this is what will be returned here. So the number of cases, total number of cases for all the products belonging to the organization selected. And then there are many graphs that break down the information by various parameters. I'm not going to go through them all because of time, but you can view the data by active substance, grouped by ATC, broken down by each medicinal product, pharmaceutical form, authorization procedure. And if we go to the next slide, please. Geographical distribution and a number of, if you've selected more than one organization, then you can see the data broken down per organization too. Next slide, please. And on the next set of slides, I think we'll probably can almost stop here, but we will, as I say, distribute these slides, but this will present a set of questions that the system may help you answer if you have, for example, a potential emerging safety issue. You need to get data quickly from the system, so we can run through a set of questions that you may need to answer very, very quickly and how to get them. So the first one here is the baseline. How many cases do we have? So you will go to the adverse event overview report that I demoed earlier, and use that one to obtain this information. So next slide, please. So geographical information in the same, you can use the same dashboard to use that information. Are there any other products involved? We saw that on the previous dashboard that we showed, so you will go to the signal evaluation dashboard to find that information. Next slide, please. How many animals treated with the product have died? How many of those have been euthanized? So you can use the adverse event overview dashboard to find that information. And then if you want to start narrowing down dates, you will then use a period-specific dates to find the data for that period. And lastly, how many new cases are we receiving daily? Then you will use that functionality I showed you, where instead of selecting all data, you will select new cases only. Next slide, please. So which other products we mentioned that before that can be obtained by the signal evaluation dashboard, and you can also go to the data stratification dashboard to see which other signs also have been associated with that product. And I was talking about the other signs, so that is in the signal evaluation dashboard. And if you want to see which other products are also showing that clinical sign, you can find that information on the data stratification dashboard. Next slide, please. And that is it. Thank you very much for listening, and then we can move on to the questions that we have received.
Thank you very much, Laura. And we realize a lot of information is coming to you, and the best way for you to get familiar will be from the moment you get really access to the system. Laura also mentioned that we will publish a detailed guidance that will help you to navigate and to identify the queries. In addition, for the second training that we are planning for January, that's on our list to also have from zero till the end. So to give you another example on how to do a particular signal detection and then actually submission the signal as well. So Laura, one of the questions was when is it anticipated that the guidance will be published?
The draft has been finalized by the business analysts, and we are currently reviewing it. So as soon as we finish the review and make the relevant changes, then it will be published.
Thank you very much. And one related question now that came in: are training videos planned in addition to the written guidance?
Well, we are going to publish the current presentations and the one that we will be giving in January as well. And then in the future, we will probably be running more training sessions, but they have not yet been planned.
Okay, so now we've made a list like yesterday of all the queries and questions that came in. So I suggest I'm going through them one by one and trying to give you answers, and then again I'm inviting, perhaps where possible, also support from our regulatory colleagues that are online. If necessary, we can give you the floor. So just lift your hands up if you want to add something to it or have an additional question to the topic that we're discussing. Don't hesitate to do that. And the first question that came in and that was from Elisa: is the field's product short name mandatory, or the search can be made by active ingredient? I think you've shown that maybe, but just to
No, it is not mandatory. When you run a report, you can choose the level at which you run it.
So indeed, you can also make a query on the active substance alone.
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct.
Next question is Daniela Golinelli. Is it the UPD available only for Explorer, or is it scheduled to release for other browsers? Explorer is becoming a nightmare with updated PCs or tablets. So this is about the UPD. So today we're showing you the EVVET. UPD is another system. So I'm not sure if we have the answer available on UPD.
Not for the UPD, but for the systems that we've been showing today, any modern browser will work, but Chrome is one of the ones that we know that is working very well, also with Edge and with Internet Explorer as well, but Chrome or Edge are preferable.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have the answer yet on UPD, but we'll find that out for you. Then another question is, who enters the products in EVVET? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit how this works, Laura.
Okay, so I think this question has two aspects. The product information that is used in the ultravigilance system as a whole is from the UPD, and the data in the UPD will be sent by the national competent authorities. Then the other aspect is how we use it in ultravigilance. We use it for reporting and for data analysis. So for reporting, if you use our web-based system that we have developed, you can select the product name. The system will show you some suggestions, and those suggestions come from entries in the UPD. And the same with the data analysis system. The data for most of the levels that we have shown you earlier, so from the product short name, the active substance, and the product composition level is coming from data in the UPD. Does that answer the question, or have I left anything out?
Yes, I think this confusion may sometimes be that so the information on the products are not coming in our product database, are not coming from the adverse events. So they're coming separately, and that's the legislative requirement is that the authorities have to provide the data in the Union product database. For the first time with the new regulation, we have an EU centralized product database, and the initial submission of the information will come from the different member states. And for the centrally authorized products, of course, the agency is dumping it from our own database into the UPD. And it is those product data that are linked automatically then to the data of the adverse events, partly automatically and partly there's going to be a manual process that we're calling coding or recoding. So once we have the product data in, it's still the task, and that can take 1, 2, 3 months possibly for us to link all the adverse events, so the product names that have been entered in the historical adverse events, to the exact corresponding product in the Union product database. So I don't know if you want to add anything further, Laura.
We mentioned that aspect at the beginning of the presentation, so if it was not very clear, perhaps once we publish the video, you can watch that part, and if it's still not very clear, please send us the question and we will include it on the questions and answers document.
Thank you. Katrina, you keep an eye on the hands. Yeah, thank you. The next question is, what is considered the receive date? I think you answered it later on then. It's the date of entry in the system, correct?
Yes, it's the date in which the adverse event report is received in the ultravigilance system.
Thank you.
There are also on the optional filters, there are other sets of data that you can use to restrict the information. So you can, on top of the message received date, you can apply the original received date or the date of most recent information that is coming from inside the report.
Thank you. Then a question from Teresa Villa. When a search is made with the active substance, the system will give you the adverse events from all the VMP that are registered in the UPD, or only the adverse events from the VMPs that the MAH owns?
This depends on the type of filter that you apply when you run the query. There is a filter which is called product MAH that will allow to restrict the data to only that of the products belonging to the marketing authorization holder that is selected when running the query. If you don't select that filter, then it will be for all the products containing that active substance.
But just where you indicated yesterday, also in one of your comments, Laura, that we're actually reviewing the access. But I think currently it is the case, even if you retrieve certain information that is not linked to one of your products, if you then drill down to the information, you will not get access to the narrative level, right?
No.
Only for those that are linked to your product.
Yes, I was going to go into this aspect more in the next training to the access level, because this is one of the things that we are currently testing. We are going to start the testing. I think some of you are participating as well on the testing this week. But yes, there will be a level of access applied after the query is run based on the logged in information of the user. So depending to which organization the user belongs to, the level of information that they can view is restricted based on the access policy.
So just to complement still that we know this is a very important topic because it will define at the end what you as a company have access to. So this is critical if we expect you to do continuous assessment of the data. So that's why also the comment was yesterday made that we're actually still reviewing, making sure that you will have the access necessary to comply with that legislative requirement. Then a question from Ivana Housman. Can all data obtained by the queries be exported, and which format, please?
Yes, it can be exported mainly in Excel or HTML.
Thank you, Laura. Then question from De Angelis Lorenzo. Do we have an option to compare directly the number of cases over time with the number of administered products over time? That's a good question. You start, Laura, or shall I start? The question is, do we have an option to compare directly the number of cases over time with the number of administered products over time? So this is related to the incidence in a way. So the incidence calculations is mentioned in the legislation, and it's something that is actually to be implemented 2 years after the implementation date. So it's by the end of 2024. Now, having said that, there is a requirement still for the companies to submit on a yearly basis all the sales, and one of the objectives was of the legislation to use those sales data to calculate the incidence rates. So this is still being put in place as we speak, and also the queries, we have it at the back of our mind, of course, because it's useful, and it's also a request from the regulators to have this type of access so that you can analyze the data next to the incidence rates. But at this moment, this is not something that we have prepared specific data warehouse queries for.
So the dashboards we've presented you today, they are under continuous development, and because we had a limited time frame in which to put them, to develop them, because they were being developed as well together with the guidelines. So there was some information that was not yet available at the time. We will go in January to production with what is called a minimum viable product, and then we will be including more functionality as time goes on. So this is not the final product. There will be some improvements, including information on sales once that becomes available.
Thank you, Laura. Another question from Louise Rasmussen. The data breakdown illustrated in the tables and the figures, is this also available for MAHs or only the NCAs? Everything we showed is going.
All the information that we've shown is available to both marketing authorization holders and competent authorities. What varies is the level of access that you will obtain based on the access policy. And as I said, we will have a dedicated slot for that on the next training session. So we will explain that in detail then in January.
Thank you, Laura. Next question from Anita Botcher. Does message receive date time frame include follow-up reports? And then it continues, if a follow-up is received after the time frame, this case will not be included, ? Does the original data time frame include these cases? So this is the current situation with EV-VET2.
Yes, so the message received date affects most of the parameters in the report. There are some columns that actually don't include that filter on the output, but the majority of them the majority of the results are based on the time frame that you select on the message received date. So yes, if there are any follow-ups after the end date that you have selected, in the majority of instances, you will not find that information.
Thank you, Laura. And a question from Daniela Golinelli again. Is it correct that regarding products without centrally authorized data for previous years or could be missing? So I think what you mean is so that certain products will not have the full data in. So the critical thing for us is to get the product data in the product database. For the centrally authorized products, the one that the agency is dealing with, this is straightforward because we can dump them from our own databases. From the member states, we need to receive them. So what we expect to happen is that by the due date, most of the data should come in, and that then we need to still take 1, 2, 3 months for certain of these data to link them, to code them, to recode them to the adverse event data in EudraVigilance. But in terms of the EudraVigilance data itself, so the reports in EV, there is no difference in the requirements in the current legislation still for centrally or non-centrally authorized data. So all the data should already be in EV-VET currently. Of course, we know that one of the big changes in the new legislation is the coming in of the non-serious cases. So previously they were only coming in through PSURs, and now they're coming in through directly in the databases as well. And one of the transition measures that we have proposed to companies is to ensure that for the time frame to the previous data log point of the PSUR up to at least up to the 28th of January next year, to already submit the non-serious cases electronically to EudraVigilance. So that's a request that was done for CAPS as also for non-CAPS, to make sure that there is no data gap between the time that we were assessing PSUR data and the time that we will now go into the signal management. So I don't know if there are other questions coming on to this from the audience. Anybody lifting? No. Then I go to a question from Sarah Bodeby. Is the search based on dates, based on original receive date in the separate cases, or what is message receive date based on?
I think we have already answered that question from a different participant, which is based, message received date is based on the date in which the adverse event report was received in the Vigilance Database. So adverse event reports are collected in batches nowadays in the VACH guideline, and when that batch message is received in EVVET, that is what counts for the message received date. Yeah. The date in which it was received in the system.
Okay, thank you. There was one question, and it was maybe, I don't know if we're going to be able to answer it. It says, what are considered new cases? I think it was related to one of the, or do you know to which slides, Laura?
Yes, I will try to explain that. So, without getting too complicated. So, the difference between selecting all cases and new cases, let's say you have a time frame of 1st of January 2021 and 30th of June 2021. If you select all cases, the system will return all adverse event report information for all adverse event reports that have been received in vigilance between those two dates, regardless whether they were initial reports or follow-ups. If you select new cases, what the system will do, it will remove from your results set any follow-ups for reports where the initial received date was before the 1st of January 2021. So it is the information that is left if you use, or that is returned if you use new cases, is the new, like any new information that has been received about an adverse event report during that period of time. So not a follow-up to already known information. Without trying to confuse you, if for a particular case you have, using still the period of time that we were describing, if you had an initial report in February and then a follow-up in March, that will be included because both the initial and the follow-up were received during the period that you are assessing. However, if you had a case in which the initial report was received in November 2020, and then the follow-up is received in February 2021, that will be removed from the data set if you select new cases, because the initial information was received prior to the period that you want the information for. The genuinely new cases received during that period. Do you think that answers the question?
To me, it's very clear, Laura, but I'm sure we need to explain it also that clearly in the guidance that we're gonna publish. Next question from Marcelo Silva. Is it possible to change from graphs to spreadsheets and then to export the data?
In the majority of the graphs, yes, there is a functionality that allows you. They are normally marked with switch to table, and you can switch to a tabular visualization and export it.
Very good. Why is the ROR in the table calculated for 0 cases too? It shouldn't be the case, no? I don't know.
If you are referring to the signal detection dashboard, it may be because I think I explained when I was presenting the dashboard, the ROR that is presented next to the number of cases between date 1 and date 2 is the cumulative ROR. So you may not have received any cases for that VEDRA term during the period that you've searched for, but they may be previous cases, like from if you've selected, let's say, this year, they may have been cases for that particular federal term in the previous year. So that is why the ROR is calculated, because it's cumulative, not just for the period.
Thank you. Another question from Marcelo Silva. The RR calculation takes in considerations the periods until period 1 and until period 2. Is this right? Question mark. Is there an option for calculation between period 1 and 2 as presented in the first columns? It's a bit difficult if you don't show it, but maybe you...
Yes, there is. Not on the signal detection dashboard, but on the adverse event dashboard, that the link that I was going to show you, and we had some technical problems. If you click on see details there is a very similar table to that I presented for the signal detection dashboard. But the difference is that the ROR that is calculated in that table is based on the message date that you enter. So it's for that particular period. So you can obtain both, well, you can obtain various sets of data, the cumulative ROR, the ROR prior to the period of analysis, and also the ROR for the period of analysis, just using a separate report.
Thank you. And again, I think we will have to make it very clear in the guidance. Paolo Bergamo, the database you're showing us could be the one mentioned in Article 70.8 of the regulation, and I think I've answered that also online already. Yes, indeed, the one that is mentioned in the implementing regulation is exactly what we're showing you now. So that article requires the companies, particular companies that doing the signal management in their own database to do once per year this type of analysis in EVVET, and that's exactly what we've shown today. Daniela Golinelli, is it possible to insert alert for certain products or active substances in order to be immediately informed if there is any new reports? And then in brackets, of course, other products than ours. I think you mean maybe your products. Go ahead.
Not at the moment. That is some functionality that we are looking at that may be implemented further to January. So that possibility will not be there in January, but it's something that we may consider for the future. What we have instead is that dashboard that I showed the concept of on the slides. The signaling report allows you don't get notified immediately. You have to actually go into the system and search, but it performs that functionality. It allows you to monitor the data for the products in a regular basis without going product by product.
Okay, thank you. Laura Gardi, how can we register our predefined queries, and then in brackets, aggregating all product brand names, in order to rerun our requests periodically?
The system has a functionality to do that, but because we were showing only partial information, I was not able to demo that, but that will be something that will be shown in January as well, because what you can do, you can select various products that you wish to aggregate together, and then there is a functionality in the system that allows you to save that. Is called a customization, and then you can reuse that to run further analysis, not only on a specific dashboard. It seems to work for all the other dashboards as well, so you only save it once. one thing to take into account on that is that you are manually aggregating something. So if, let's say, you've got a new product authorized that also belongs to that group that you wish to analyze together, you will have to manually add it to the set as well. But grouping of data is something that is going to be discussed further to January to see what are the best ways of not having to manually do it every time.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate message. So for the start, it will be partly a manual process, and then eventually we're hoping that we can drive this directly in the Union Product Database, where we can create the groupings directly.
But I think we have covered during the presentation when I was introducing the different levels of the product hierarchy. There are many, many ways in which you can already group data. And I think using a combination of those options, it will probably cover most instances of the type of data that you wish to group. There is probably something that is not there, and then you will have to go to that manual option that we've mentioned. But with the combination of the product marketing authorization holder and then combining the product short name with the product, the composition and so on, you probably get to a set of data that is very close to what you wish to group.
Thank you. And I think the next question is similar, probably from Rosa Calonge. If your company has different marketing authorization holders, how can obtain all the data for all the group's products during data analysis for continuous monitoring? So do I understand the question? If you are an external company providing services for different companies, so how can you obtain? Yes, you understand the question as well, like this?
The way I understand it, if you use the product MAH filter, is not restricted to one selection. You can select more than one product MAH. So let's say you wish to assess. There are very similar products, but they are marketed under different marketing authorization holders, and you wish to assess the data together, you can then select both marketing authorization holders and the relevant products or substances or composition, and then the data that will be aggregated by the system. I'm not sure whether I've answered the question.
Thank you very much, Laura. I think you have. I'm just looking now because those further questions came in after we started with the Q&A. So do the line listings includes other VEDRA terms than LLT, as currently happens? I mean, it could be useful to have a column with PTLLT, HLT, and even SOC terms in order to allow to perform filters in the line listing.
If you are referring to the actual output of the line listing, is that on the display is at LLT level as reported. But we can consider a further improvement in the system after January to include on the, because there is a separate report where you can obtain a straight line listing. So in there, it could be included, the VEDRA hierarchy could be included to then on the output, you could select the level of the VEDRA terms and show it at different levels, aggregate the data at different levels. That shouldn't be too difficult, but obviously needs to be prioritized.
Thank you, Laura. And we're now coming, I think, to also some questions that are potentially linked to the presentation from yesterday. When reviewing cumulative data in UPD, Pharmacovigilance Database, back to data when first marketed, for most products, the UPD will not have a complete data set, as only serious adverse events submitted prior to 28 January 2020. What is your advice to companies regarding the impact on this, on our assessment, and or how MAHs should compensate for this when assessing signals in UPD, please? So, I mean, first of all, I think maybe I'll give the floor also to Daniel in a moment. So it's the question is, we don't have the full data set for all the products on the non-serious cases. So if a signal is identified now with new data, you don't necessarily have the data from previously. By definition, the serious cases are in. So, but it can be the case indeed that you identify a signal that is related to qualified a non-serious event. What we said yesterday as well is it can also be normally you should have most of the signals you should have covered through your normal PSUR assessments over the years if it's all the products. So if you assess something that has already previously been assessed and documented in PSURs, I think you can refer to that still if it's about all the products. So that's one thing to say. And then secondly, I think there is a cutoff point now when we're going into signal management. You can only work with the data that are available. It's as simple as that. So, and hopefully the new data are of good quality enough to allow you to judge whether there is a causal association or not. So I don't know, Daniel, if you want to add something to that. Okay, thank you. No hands yet, Katarina? Yes? No? Okay. So I'm scrolling down myself. One related to yesterday, I think. Have the criteria for case thresholds for a signal. 3 for medically important terms and 5 for other clinical signs presented during yesterday's presentation being considered applied for the current calculations in the data warehouse. Laura.
Not at the moment, because as I mentioned before, we were developing the system at the same time as the guidelines were being developed. So this part of the system was developed before we had that information. However, in some of the dashboards, there is a functionality where you can select manually when to calculate the error, so the parameters in which the error should be calculated or not. So you can control that manually as well. And this is another issue that will be considered for prioritization in the future, to include the information related to the number of cases and whether to calculate the error or not, based on whether it's an MIT. And I think I showed when we were presenting the output that in some instances the medical important events are highlighted, and some of the improvements that we are thinking of in the future is also to have a filter to allow you to remove all the information, all the rest of the information, and just focus your attention on medical important events. So those tools will be available in the future. Obviously, we don't have a date yet, because first we need to stabilize the current system. But those further functionalities are being already taken as potential improvements.
But just to add to this, as I explained also yesterday in the presentation, and as it's also detailed on the guideline, that this rule that we introduced was more like not to be understood as a strict rule. So the idea is not that you apply a filter, and if it has less than 3 cases, you're not going to look into it, because You should look into it, but it's more to have an idea what we are expecting, how many cases usually have a signal. But maybe there is a case that involved a lot of animals, and maybe it's very well documented, or 2 cases. That could be also something. So the idea is not that you apply a filter and then you don't look into that will never be a signal, because it could be. So same as we repeated many times yesterday, keep it flexible, because it really depends on the signal, on the product, and on the data. But yeah, so that, just keep it always flexible.
Thank you, Dan. You're actually out of focus on the screen. But it was very clear again. Next question from Alexandra Hirsch. You select the 1st of January 2005 as start date for the period to consider all cases. Was this selected only for the test system demonstration, or will this be the start date for the final system as well? Laura?
The reason I selected it is because historically, I think the first Vigilance system went live in 2005. So that is where the message received date, most likely the first message received date in the system will be based on. But there are older cases in there that were entered manually, but the message was sent to the system at a later date.
Yes, thank you, Laura. I'm also old enough to remember that. So if I remember well, I think at that moment the requirement was for the companies to submit backlog data starting in 2005, and some data were actually in there already from before that time. So it is possible to extend that date further down to into the 90s even, if you think you have data there, Laura.
But with the caveat that the message was sent to the system later. So you will find earlier cases. So if you look at the original receive date, the cases may be from, I don't know, 95, but they were actually sent to the system in 2005, because that is when Vigilance was firstly go live.
A question from Deborah. Can marketization holders only use PUD for signal detection, or are they expected to use their own data systems too? So, I mean, this is what the implementing regulation and the legislation says, that companies are allowed. So there's no specific rule. It's just that you're allowed to use your own database system, but at least once a year you have to do an analysis using Vigilance Veterinary. So using the EU data, the data in the EU database, which is not only the EU data, it includes also the third country reports, of course. As not all of the non-serious cases received by the MEH since the launch will be sent to EVVET3, we will not be able to use the cumulative ROR. Now, I think it's coming back to what I've explained earlier. That indeed for certain non-serious cases you would be missing certain cases electronically, but you could, if you have all the products and you have assessed this issue, normally you should have assessed this, I think, in the PSURs. You can always refer to that. Then a question from Kristen Mandello. Would you please provide more information as to why ROR is selected as a statistical test to use, given the limitations of the EVVET system, limited denominator data? Will other statistics be available? Laura?
In the previous system, we used to use the PRR, and then in EV Human, PRR was changed to ROR a few years ago. So we decided to go with the same statistical measure. I'm not sure whether, Daniel, because you used to work in the human side, you can explain the rationale of why ROR was selected. Were you part of the group? Yes.
No, I just, this is, maybe I can help a little bit. This is historical, but just to say also that it's definitely not the case that other statistical measures are excluded, or techniques like Bayesian ones, and there's a lot of literature about it, but it has been shown that none of them is really much better than others. I think that's the case. I think there's an argument about what I'm saying now still, but at least on the human side, those have been compared on large data sets. And the question is indeed, maybe these behave a little possibly different on smaller data sets, but at least for us now, we stick to the ROR. Having said that, and it's clear from the guidelines, they're not a definite measure for you to say this is a signal or not. It is just indicative, and it's there to help you prioritizing.
I think that originally the change from PRR to ROR was because with the ROR you can implement more advanced analysis, but when you look at them separate, like just as these two separate measures, they were very similar. But we decided to implement the ROR for more advanced analysis that they required more modeling, but for which the ROR is better.
And also, as Josh mentioned, and I think Daniel mentioned yesterday during his presentation, the RR is not the sole focus of signal detection. There is just another tool. There are many other aspects that need to be considered to highlight a signal to be further evaluated.
Okay, we're coming closely to the end. I'm taking a few more. There's another question, I think linked to yesterday, Daniel. Here, what happens if you receive a case in which a medically important term is reported and it has already been included in the SPC? Do we have to consider it as a signal, although it's no new information?
Yeah, I can address this because it's a common question. I think the main message is that when you're comparing, when you have a signal and you're comparing if an event is already listed in your SPC, it's not that we're looking if the event is just literally on the SPC. Well, if it is, probably there's no any new information regarding that, and therefore you can consider it reflected. But when you have, in the cases when you have synonyms, in the cases when you have events that are more specific and you have a more general term in your SPC, the thinking should be always in terms of added value, in terms of risk minimization. So that is this new event that, or is this event that maybe is more specific, adding more value? If I add it to the SPC, would the clinician, would the veterinarian change their course of treatment? Would it provide a better prognosis? So even if you may say, well, we have a similar term, so you have to think of it, what would be the added value of having this term in the SPC instead of the other one that maybe is more general and could be considered covered. So you have to, again, you have to keep it flexible, you have to apply expert clinical judgment, and each case can be different.
Thank you very much, Daniel, and you came into focus. Okay, last two. Is the calculation of ROR based on case count or on product sign pairs? Laura?
Yes, it's on product sign pairs. So for each adverse event and each product, the ROR is calculated. On the signal detection dashboard, there is one tab that I didn't show because of the performance issues we were experiencing. But if you are interested to see how the ROR for a specific term is calculated, you can use that tab to do so. So it shows you all the different measures that have been used to calculate the ROR. So it shows you the A, B, C, and D values, all the different values that have been used to calculate the specific ROR for a term. So that is quite useful if you are interested in seeing what data went into the calculation of a specific ROR.
Thank you, Laura. And the last question, I think I can answer myself, was a follow-up question by Deborah. So if you use your POD for signal detection at least once annually, but there is no requirement to use an MEH data system in addition to this. So essentially all signal detection activities by MEH can be performed on the Union Pharmacovigilance Database. Indeed, that's the fact. So you can do all the analysis directly on the database system if you like, if you don't want to use your own system or you don't have a system. That was the original intention. Thank you. Okay, we're coming to the end, and I want to thank particularly Laura for maintaining with the hitches also of the system. And we owe you to come back to this. We owe you to publish the guidance soon, making the database and the system available so that you can try and go into it and start playing with the data. And hopefully also we should be in January be in a position to give you more insights, more examples, and also we will show you at that moment how to actually submit the signals. So that's the main objective of the upcoming trainings in January. So I'd like to thank you all for the questions. We hope that we've given you some appetite now for lunch and also for the systems, and see you soon. Thank you very much. Thank you.